Welcome back, everyone, to our chock full preview episode this week for college football. Leif and I are licking our chops over this one. We have 4 top 25 matchups to bring you this week. Just we've hinted at a lot of games so far in our production of this show, and a lot of them are finally happening this week. So we're very, very, very excited to bring you this episode. And we're just going to jump right in because I've got my water. We've both gone to the bathroom. We might be here for a really long time. So we're just going to jump right in with number 1, Clemson is traveling to South Bend to take on number 4, Notre Dame. This is the game in the SEC schedule this season. That's going to kick off at 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. FPI is giving Clemson a 65.8% chance of victory. Do we think that's fair?
I think it's a respect that they deserve, just as how good they've been recently. But I don't know. I mean, it's his second start ever for a quarterback, and South Bend's not an easy place to play. The ACC allows fans. I think that might even be a little high, but I think it puts respect on the name of a dominant program the last 6-7 years. So this is a great game. I can't wait.
One of the biggest matchups all year in college football this season. Let's talk Clemson a little bit. Obviously, no Trevor Lawrence in this one, which has been a storyline that's been developing. Do we have an update on his availability to travel?
Not that I've seen. The last I heard was Dabo is trying to make it happen, but obviously Trevor Lawrence has to be healthy and not showing symptoms and passing some tests, and they haven't really disclosed any of that information since our episode the other day.
So that would usually probably hint to him not being able to make the trip. They're probably leaving either today or tomorrow to make that trip happen up to South Bend. So without Trevor Lawrence, they rely upon DJ Ugalele. Did I get it? Close enough?
I think so. Something close.
Close enough. Anyway, in his career, he's 42 of 60 for 444 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he hasn't thrown a pick. Also, a noticeable stat for me in this is he hasn't been sacked. He's only been sacked once. I think he's huge, but he's also very mobile. He's a good athlete. We saw him take a 4th and 2 read option to the house last weekend in a pivotal play against Boston College to keep their momentum rolling and mount that comeback. What is the role that he's going to play in this game, in obviously the biggest game of his life, but the biggest game of the year for Clemson?
I think they're going to simplify the playbook a lot for him. Rely on Travis Etienne, your workhorse back. He's amazing. He's got 606 rushing yards and 434 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns put together. So I think they're going to rely on him more than DJ. I think DJ is going to be asked to, hey, don't turn the ball over, and we want you to make some simple throws on early yards. We don't want to get him behind on the sticks and have Notre Dame's experience get the better of him with some schemes. So I think DJ's job is just going to be, hey, run when you have to. Don't make any turnovers that cost us big plays and field position, because that's the way Notre Dame needs to win. They need to just limit them. Clemson just has to play a game that's more clean without that little fumbled 99-yard touchdown they gave up last year. Last week that was a 14-point change in direction. They just need to play mistake-free football, and they've got the talent to take care of it.
I think I agree with that. Travis Etienne's obviously going to play a massive factor in this game. He's such a dynamic runner of the football. He's now the ACC's leading rusher of all time. He was awarded that last week in his performance. But I think such an underrated quality, and we've talked about this before, is his availability out of the backfield in the passing game. Like, there's not a lot of people that can guard him, that can cover him. But we think he might have someone on Notre Dame's defense that can step up and make those plays, right?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a superb athlete, and he's either going to spy DJ and see if they start running DJ a lot, or cover Etienne out of the backfield. And I think that he's a huge key. I think that's the biggest matchup in this game is that individual matchup, as he's a rover linebacker that's got NFL level mobility and the speed to match up with Etienne, which not a lot of college linebackers can say they sport. So that, I mean, if he's able to guard him out of the backfield, that's going to make life for DJ a lot harder, not having a support outlet just 5 yards down the field rather than, and then he has to throw down the field against an experienced secondary.
I think that's very fair analysis as well. And with that matchup, I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis built upon the Clemson wide receivers in this game. Cornell Powell had a great week last week. He had a big performance, but Amari Rodgers was still really quiet. He's one of the most athletic players on Clemson's roster. He's an amazingly talented wide receiver. He needs to be a factor in this game. He needs to be able to win one-on-one matchups and be available for DJ in these if they get into 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12 situations where they still have to convert and move the sticks, as well as be able to take the top off that Notre Dame defense. I think the wide receivers, you're really going to need, yes, I agree that they're going to shrink the playbook a little bit with DJ. He doesn't have the knowledge that Trevor Lawrence does, but he's got the arm talent. The guy can throw the ball. He showed that last week. He showed he's a playmaker. And so I think you need these wide receivers on the outside to really make a big impact in this one to keep Notre Dame's defense off balance. Speaking of Notre Dame, let's touch on their offense a little bit to start with. We have Ian Book at quarterback there. He's only thrown 150 passes so far in 6 games this season. Does that surprise you at all? That seems very low.
I think it's lower than it should be, considering that their schedule hasn't been overly difficult so far. And I would have expected them to try to get him more reps early before they play the big dogs in Clemson and some of the other tough opponents they'll play down the road. But no, Notre Dame is a run-first offense. They have been. They have a great offensive line, and Kyron Williams, their running back's really impressive. He reads blocks well, and he's got more juice to him than some of their old running backs that like to 4 yards in a cloud of dust, which works for them. But if you can take one to the house, especially against a really fast, athletic Clemson defense, I think their best recipe is to run the ball against Clemson. But I'm surprised that Book hasn't thrown more in previous games, and that may hurt them.
I think Notre Dame, at this point in their season, has proven to be too one-dimensional on offense, like you touched on. They're great at running the football, and they've shown over the talent level that they've played so far in the ACC teams that they can run the ball on them. Like, that's not an issue. I think when you're playing a team like Clemson, who has so many athletes on both sides of the ball, you're going to have to do more than run the ball. They're going to be like, everyone in the world knows you're going to try and run the ball against Clemson. So what are they going to do? They're going to put people in the box. They know there's been so much talk about Ian Book not being able to win that big game, make those big throws to beat a team like Clemson. So that's going to be the storyline. If you're Notre Dame on offense, can you make those throws? Can you be effective in the passing game? And I think it needs to happen early in the game. I think they need to establish the fact that, hey, if you're going to put 6 or 7 in the box, we're going to throw it on you, and we're going to move the ball, and we're going to score. If they can do that, Clemson's in trouble. But if they can't do that, I think Clemson has an edge in this game if they can only stop the run and hence stop Notre Dame, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you put it perfectly, and I think in those scripted first 10 plays that most coaches have, because they've been doing their scouting for a week already, if not more, for this type of matchup. They know what type of plays they're going to run, and I think that if they go a 10-play opening drive, I bet you it's a half and a half. I bet you it's 5 passes, 5 runs. And sure, there could be a situational thing like a 4th and 1 or 3rd and inches, and that could script it. But I think those first 10 scripted plays that are like normal yardage are going to be very even. I think they're going to try to get Ian Book outside of the pocket because he's a pretty good mover. I think that they're going to run a lot of shallow crosses and then try to take the top off the defense once in a while because Clemson's shown they're vulnerable through the air. I mean, Boston College put up 28 on them in the first half, and I guess 21 offensive points, but they were moving it, even the possessions they didn't score. And I think Notre Dame's really got to take a look at what Yurkovich was able to do, the quarterback for Boston College, and say, hey, Ian Book, you should be able to do this too.
I agree. I think Ian Book's athletic ability is going to play a huge role in this game. I think, if anything, just to extend plays a little bit and let his wide receivers get open a little bit. The leading pass catcher here for Notre Dame only has 14 catches and 264 yards. That's very surprising. And I know that they spread the ball around. They're a very balanced attack when they pass the football. They deem themselves tight end U. Stanford fans might have a little bit of an issue with that, but they do have very talented tight ends, and they have talent in the passing game. But a 14 catches, 264 yards for your leading guy, that's not going to get it done against a team like Clemson.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is that none of their receivers have like the explosive plays either, especially considering they're playing, suboptimal competition compared to Clemson, of course, but also like a lot of their games haven't been very close. And even the ones that have been close shouldn't have been. And so, yeah, I think they need, in years past, they've had a Will Fuller, someone who can take the top off the defense in their best years. And I think they're lacking that. And that's where Clemson could be exposed because they're young in their secondary. They've got a ton of talent, of course, but youth in college football can be punished. They can be greedy and jump, and then you get beat with a double move, and that's the difference in a game. And I think Ian Book's going to have to look to push the ball down the field rather than throw so many dink and dumps because Clemson's got too much talent for that to beat them.
I think another interesting point to make in this game is Clemson looked bad last week on defense. They looked really bad against – Jurkovich is a good quarterback, and Boston College has talented players on the outside, but still, they looked bad. They looked like at points in time they couldn't cover. And so I think they're going to be a little bit more – I think they're going to be a little angry at their performance from last week. And there's going to be storylines coming into this. We're already talking about it, that Clemson might be vulnerable through the air. And I think they're the number one team in the nation, and they're going to say, listen, we're going to do everything that we can to stop Notre Dame dead in their tracks. I think you're going to see a better performance from Clemson's defense this week, and that's going to make it even more imperative for Notre Dame to be able to move the ball early and often and score points. I think if they have to rely on 3 instead of 7, it's going to be a really long night because Clemson still has shown that they are still very explosive even without Trevor Lawrence at QB.
I don't think Notre Dame has a chance if they're playing from behind. Whereas like Clemson, I think they're always in the game. If Notre Dame gets behind by even 10, I'd start to panic a little bit. I don't think they're built like that. They need to run and control the time of possession. And if they can't do that early, and Book's not able to push them out of playing 8 men in the box, then this game is not going to be close. But I think it'll be a closer game than in past years when these two have matched up.
So we've discussed this numerous times already together. This is the game in the ACC. Is this a college football playoff elimination game?
No, because if Clemson were to lose, they have the excuse that Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing, and then they come back and they can win the rest of their games. And you can't tell me that the college football playoff is going to say, oh, there's better teams than Clemson. So I don't think so. But Notre Dame may be out if they lose.
I think that would be honestly like almost a dream scenario for the ACC if Notre Dame were to win this week. These two get matched up again in an ACC championship game, if that's even possible. I don't know what side Notre Dame has fallen into in that conference, but if that's even possible, and then have Clemson beat them, and then you're looking at both of these teams making the college football playoff, because I absolutely agree. Without Trevor Lawrence, this loss doesn't look as bad as it would have if they did have Trevor Lawrence on that team. But with that being said, I do agree with you that if Notre Dame does lose this game, I don't think there's a way for them to win, to make the college football playoff, unless that scenario is reversed, where they were to play Clemson again and beat them. So I think this is such an interesting matchup. So many storylines to talk about in this one. Do you have anything else to add before we move on to our second one?
One thing that I think is interesting is that Notre Dame's offensive line is really good this year, and Clemson hasn't moved the ball. They haven't moved people off the line and dominated it, stopping the run or getting after the quarterback. And they also are missing one of their more skilled players, Xavier Lawrence. He's suspended for the first half of this game. And then on the reverse side is Clemson's offensive line has done a great job protecting DJ and Trevor Lawrence. But Notre Dame also doesn't have one of the big boys that they typically have. They have Romeo Okwara, Jerry Tillery, Sheldon Day, and Stephon Tuitt, like in past years. And then I don't think they have one of those guys who's a top 3-round NFL prospect. And I think neither team's dominant on the D line. So I think the offensive lines will dominate this game.
Yeah, and with that being said, I still have a feeling that it's going to be low scoring for some weird reason. I don't think you're going to see a 48-45 shootout. I just don't think Notre Dame's built that way, and I think their defense is good enough to hold Clemson within striking distance for at least 3 quarters, if not the full game. So a really good one here at 7:30 on NBC. Make sure to check that one out. It's going to be one of the best games of the season. Moving forward, this is a college football playoff eliminator by all stretch of the imagination. For number 8 Florida travels to number 5 Georgia, they are the home team, although the game's being played at Jacksonville, so that's kind of a toss-up. This game's always played there in Jacksonville. That game's going to kick off at 3:30 Eastern time. That's slotted in as that marquee matchup on CBS for the SEC. Georgia's given a slight edge, 64% in the FPI. What do we think about this matchup looking from just the outside in? What do we see?
Well, I think it's super interesting because Georgia has the best defense in the SEC, and Florida is probably right behind Alabama as the second best offense in the SEC. So right then you just get a contrast, and one thing will, whoever is able to meet in the middle a little more should be favored. But there's also something to be said that Georgia's offense has underperformed, and so has Florida's defense. So which one's going to play there? So it's a really fascinating matchup. And then, of course, we've talked about numerous times on the news episodes of this show, is Florida's – we don't know how healthy they are. We don't know who has coronavirus, who's back from it, who's feeling ill effects of it, and how that's going to impact their offense and defense. Last week they were able to beat Missouri and pretty handily, but you don't know against a team like Georgia, who's just got more elite level bodies that could expose that weakness. And I think it'll be super fascinating to see how these two opposed philosophy teams play against one another.
Yeah, I see this game with a lot of similarities as the one we saw earlier in the year between Alabama and Georgia. That came in with a high-powered Alabama offense and a high-powered Georgia defense. I think this is a very similar scenario. I just think the teams are more evenly matched, truth be told. I think Alabama's a step ahead of both of these teams at this current point, but Florida's still offensively very talented. They have all the pieces. Kyle Trask is a great QB. Kyle Pitts is an excellent receiver. And you got so much talent on that side of the ball that they can put up points against this Georgia team. And I think one of the biggest storylines in this game is, can Stetson Bennett make enough plays for Georgia and that offense to keep them in this game? Because their defense isn't going to win it. They're not going to be able to win the game on defense. They're going to need to score.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing. And I think if Stetson Bennett is able to take care of the ball but make plays, then Georgia should be favored. But if he's only taking care of the ball and not pushing the ball down the field, you'll see another game. It's kind of like 14-3 against Kentucky, except Kentucky doesn't have the offensive firepower Florida does, and that would favor Florida. So I think the biggest thing is, can Stetson Bennett play mistake-free and move the ball, or does moving the ball for him entail mistakes? And then the other side of it is, can Georgia make – and all their defensive ability make Kyle Trask uncomfortable? Because right now he's got an 18-2 touchdown to interception, and he's like mirroring a pace that Joe Burrow set last year on his Heisman. Like, that's crazy to say, but he's only a few hundred yards short in fewer passing attempts, and he didn't have some of those huge play receivers like everyone on LSU's offense was an NFL player. This is an NFL player this year. So I mean, with less talent, to put up those numbers are ridiculous, and one thing's got to give, and I'm very excited to watch that one.
I think this is such an intriguing matchup, right? I think, but I got to circle back to it. I think when we saw Georgia play Alabama, Stetson Bennett tried to push the ball down the field when Georgia was losing, and he made mistakes. He threw interceptions. Has he grown enough in these last few games that we've seen Georgia play to take care of that ball against a defense that, let's face it, last week Florida was without their three best defensive backs. So there's holes there for Florida that Georgia can exploit, and I think they need to exploit. I think they need, like I said with Notre Dame, I think they need to be able to throw the ball to keep this Florida defense balanced and not just throw 6 or 7 or 8 men even in the box to say, look, you're not going to get a yard running the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be wise of Florida to play a stacked box, at least initially, and say, hey, Stetson Bennett, can you beat us here? Because I know Zamir White, he's going to be hungry and that really good offensive line are going to be hungry to just push the ball and win by playing defense and running the ball. And so, yeah, that's huge. Is there any reason you think that JT Daniels or Dwan Odom or Dwan Mathis come out and don't play over Stetson Bennett? Like, if he struggles in the first half, but it's still a ball game, do you think there's a switch of quarterback that could happen?
I don't know. I think that would have to be something that would happen before the game if it's close. I think if they come out and they're just getting obliterated, like they're getting pushed around, it's 21-0, something like that in like early second quarter, maybe, potentially. I think it's a massive game for one player in particular on this Georgia offense, and that's Stetson Bennett. They have so much potential. George Pickens is an excellent wide receiver that is just completely underutilized because they just can't push the ball down the field as of right now at this kid's arm. So I know George Pickens has his problems. He's done some really dumb things in the past with some unsportsmanlike penalties. He didn't make the trip last week to Kentucky, so that may have hurt them in their offensive scheme. But with that guy on the field, they're very dynamic, and they just need a guy that can get them the ball. So I think it's the biggest game of Stetson Bennett's life, and he really needs to go and show that he's talented enough to lead this team to beat Florida, because whoever wins this game is going to get matched up with Alabama again. That's just what it boils down to.
I mean, yeah. So I think that if Georgia doesn't win this game, then that's the end of Stetson Bennett's tenure as the starter, unless he plays phenomenally and trashes out duels him. But assuming the way that they lose this game is he doesn't play well because Florida's defense is nowhere near Georgia's, then I think JT Daniels or Dwan Mathis takes over down the stretch, and it's kind of a lost season for Georgia because they've got college football playoff or bust kind of expectations, and whether that's fair or not to have every year, that's what they see themselves as. And like you said, this is the SEC East. Whoever wins this is winning the SEC East, and then plays Alabama for the SEC championship game, and that is basically for a berth in the college football playoff. So this is just like Notre Dame and Clemson. This is probably the biggest game in the SEC this season, and Notre Dame and Clemson was the biggest game in the ACC.
Yeah, it's amazing for us fans that these two are aligning on the same week. There's just so many intriguing storylines in both of these games, and I think it's really interesting what you touched on is Georgia's expecting themselves to be in that conversation for the college football playoff every year, but so is Florida. Like, truth be told, with Dan Mullen, they're expecting to be in that conversation every single year. They think they're a better program than Georgia is. So this is a game where they can really say, like, yeah, look, we were depleted. We were depleted for a really long time, and we missed a few weeks. We made some mistakes, but here we are, and we are still a very dynamic football team. And I think if they win this game and then they win out and you have a chance to play Alabama and they can beat Alabama somehow in that SEC championship game, I don't see a better fourth team in the country that's more deserving to go to the playoff other than a Florida team if Notre Dame loses this week.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think they match up better with Alabama than Georgia does. Whether they win or not against Georgia is to be seen, but they've got the offensive firepower that just Georgia couldn't match. They've got explosive receivers. Kadarius Toney's probably like second to Jalen Waddle when Jalen Waddle's healthy in terms of the best with the ball in his hands after the catch or in any situation. And with him being healthy and active, like you give the ball to that guy or Kyle Pitts down the field and you can score points. So if the big thing for them is just if they can stop a team, and that's what they'll see is Stetson Bennett good enough to beat a subpar Florida defense, or is that Florida defense good enough to stop the subpar quarterback play of Georgia?
I think you just summed it up beautifully, truth be told. That game's going to kick off at 3:30 Eastern time. Once again, that's on CBS, so make sure to tune into that one. Huge potential in both of those first two matchups. Cannot be overlooked. A really intriguing game that gets us started actually tomorrow night. It's Friday. That's the Friday night kickoff at 9:45 p.m. on FS1 is going to be the game for BYU. Number 9 BYU goes into Boise, Idaho to take on Boise State. They're ranked number 21 right now. This is it for if you're a BYU fan, right? This is your one defining moment to say we are a legitimate top 10 team. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that they have taken care of business as best they can, but you have to beat someone, and Boise State's the only someone on their roster. On their schedule.
Absolutely. We've seen great things out of Zach Wilson so far this year. He's been touted as one of the better quarterbacks in the country. He's taking care of the ball. He's 144 of 193 in his passing attempts for over 2,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So clearly he is having a fantastic season statistically. Do we think that translates to this in their schedule, stout Boise State defense?
I think he'll do better than he has. He's really struggled against Boise State in his career, and I don't think that all is on him. I think that this BYU roster is a lot better than the previous ones. But I think this Boise State defense is just as good, if not better, than the ones that really made him struggle. So I don't think he's going to have that type of like ridiculous numbers. I mean, he's thrown almost 200 passes and has fewer than 50 incompletions. That's ridiculous. That's over 75%. And 19-2. I don't think those numbers are feasible against a Boise State team that's top 25 talent. But if he doesn't turn the ball over, they've got a chance. I think Boise State's really talented on both sides of the ball, maybe more so than BYU, and they just haven't had as many opportunities to display that.
I agree. I think a clear path for BYU victory here is in the running game. You have a guy that has Tyler Algier, who has 91 carries, 587 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But then again, you have Zach Wilson back there. The dude is an athlete. Say what you will about him. He can run the ball, he can throw the ball, and he makes good decisions. At least he's shown that so far this year. Would you agree that BYU on the ground, if they can show that they can run the ball for chunks against this Boise State defense, is really going to be a huge tell of how they do in this football game?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think what's been unfortunate for Wilson the last few matchups against Boise State is they've gotten behind, and then Boise State's been able to pin their ears back and just rush him and make tough decisions. I think balance is the key to any good football team. And Algier is a more than capable back, and they also have got Taylor Cateau out of the backfield, and he does a great job catching the ball out of the backfield as more of a scat back as compared to Algier's hammer. And if they can balance that, then BYU's got a far better chance than they do at just trying to say, hey, Zach Wilson, win this game all by yourself. And I agree. I think your point of his legs, he's a phenomenal athlete. I mean, 6'3", 205, and runs very well and is able to throw fairly accurately on the run. So I think he's got to be accurate and he's got to be on his A game, but the run is immensely important.
Absolutely. I think flipping the table a little bit to the Boise State offense, we don't necessarily have a status update on Brad Brockmere, their starting quarterback there. He missed last week. Does it really matter, though, is my question, if Brockmere plays or not? With Jack Sears, this USC transfer who stepped in last week, only had 4 incomplete passes, threw for 291 yards and 3 touchdowns.
I don't think it matters that much. I mean, if it may matter more than we know about just like chemistry with receivers and stuff, but Jack Sears is really talented. All USC commits are talented. And like you said, 19-23 against a pretty decent Air Force team. And he was pushing the ball down the field, and they scored 49 points in that game without their starting running back, George Olani, for most of it. So yeah, I agree. I think it's not that much of a detriment to them, if at all.
Let's touch on their running game a little bit. Holani missed some time last week. He is 105 yards and a touchdown through 2 games. I see he only carried the ball twice last game, so that kind of explains that a little bit. But Austin Van Buren came in and had 12 carries for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think they're going to have to get more production on the ground than that. I think they're going to need to run the ball for over 100 yards to keep this BYU defense on its toes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they need to be able to similarly have a lot of balance. And I think 12 carries for Austin Van Buren and only 2 for Olani, granted he was dinged up, isn't enough. I mean, that's only 14 for your top 2 rushers as opposed to 23 throwing plays. I think they need to be very close to a 50-50 split to keep Zach Wilson and what has been an explosive offense off the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think the storyline here in this game, though, is Boise State's defense. I think they need to be the difference in this football game. They need to create turnovers. They need to – and I think the biggest thing that they can do to stump BYU and Zach Wilson is they have so much more talent on their defense than anything that BYU has seen so far this year. And they're going to be able to show Zach Wilson looks and different coverages and things that he hasn't even seen yet this year that could confuse him and could create some of those big plays on defense. And like, you're playing teams like Texas State, you're not going to get super diverse coverages and super diverse defensive schemes from someone like that. Like, they can try, but they just don't have the athletic ability to make it happen and make you that confused. Boise State, though, is different than they do, and they also have depth and experience on all facets of that defense.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing is their experience. They've got continuity together. They've got the athletes and experience playing together. Not just each player's played, but they've all played together for a few years. and they can disguise coverages, blitz from even the secondary, and they know how to play in tandem. And I think not enough teams around the country have the type of depth and talent, especially in non-Power 5 conferences, that Boise State has. And to me, that's why they're probably the best program that's not Power 5 consistently, because they're able to build teams together that play together every year and have 4 stars and the occasional 5-star on their defense.
All right. So we've discussed this as we introduced this game, but this is it for BYU, right? There's just so much riding on them this week. They're in the top 10. They're 6 or 7-0. I always forget where they're at, but this is their chance to prove their legitimacy in the rest of the eyes of the college football world. There's so many people that are just like, yeah, but who have they played? They can finally put that argument to bed this week. But I think they need to not only win the game, they need to dominate Boise State. They need to win by 20. And with that being said, I don't know if that's necessarily possible with how much talent Boise State has. But for a lot of the eyes of the college football world, that's where we're at. It's like, if you're this top 10 team, you should be able to beat a Boise State team handily, not just beat them. So if you view yourself as that, you need to go out and show it. So would you agree with kind of that take?
Yeah, I mean, the whole goal is making the college football playoff, and they need to really, really make a statement, because they're on the outside looking in, and this is their only chance. So this has to be a huge statement game, but they can't overlook it. They can't be like, oh, well, they're 21st in the country. This is not a team to look down upon and be like, hey, we're gonna beat them like we beat Texas State. So yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting game that has a feel that's do or die. Like, if they lose, they're going to be their season's effectively done, and if they win, they have to win by a lot, because I mean, what does a 3-point win get you from the 9 spot to the 7? Maybe if teams ahead of you lose.
Yeah, and the question that begs to be asked with all of that is, are they able to live up to all of that hype? Are they able to show up with all of this expectation and show out and have a great performance?
I think Boise State's too deep. I think Boise State's too deep, but I think it'll be a really good game. I don't think either team's going to blow the other team out.
I absolutely agree. I think this is a very evenly matched game. I think I think all top 25 matchups are. I do believe both these teams are talented enough to be inside the top 25 in the country. I think BYU has made incredible strides in their football program, and I think they deserve a top 15 ranking, but they're putting it all on the line this week. And so just to kind of conclude that a little bit, I completely lost my train of thought. Anyway, that's what's happening this Friday night. That's going to kick off at 9:45 Eastern time. That's on FS1. Make sure to tune into that one if you're doing anything Friday night. It's going to be a very, very fun game to watch. Yeah. You got anything else on BYU Boise?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. I mean, it's going to be a good game, and it's do or die for both teams almost, because Boise State, if they can make a statement, they've got an outside chance of a New Year's Six one as well. I mean, but we kind of think Cincinnati's got that locked up. But what if they make a playoff? And so one of these teams outside the Power 5 has a chance.
It just clicked back in. My train of thought just clicked back in. I think one last point that I'll make about this before we transfer. I think you're looking at a BYU team that, in all respects, if this was a normal season so far, they're probably in that 18, 20, 15 range ranked right now at what they are with who they've played. If everyone started at a normal spot, everyone had already played 10 weeks of a season, I think that's where they would be sitting at, truth be told. And I don't mean that as any sort of disrespect towards the BYU program. I just think that's how these teams are oftentimes viewed in regards to Power 5 teams that have played a very good competition in that light. So I do believe this is more of like an 18-21 matchup rather than a 9-21 matchup. But with that being said, if BYU can dominate Boise State in this year, they can make a significant leap. I do believe that. And so that was where my train of thought was kind of going before it completely went out the window. So sorry to go off on another tangent, but once again, 9:45 Eastern, BYU, Boise State, going to be a good one Friday night. All right, moving on. Michigan upset last weekend. They fell to number 23. It's still a top 25 matchup this week because they are traveling to number 13 Indiana, a tough one to kind of bounce back with after a loss to to your in-state rival Michigan State. That's going to kick off at noon on FS1. What do we see in this game?
I think Michigan's going to come out hungry, and they're going to play a really good, complete game because you don't see too many times where they throw the ball 51 times. I mean, even in games where they've been down, they don't throw that much. They're a run-first program. And their lead rusher has had really nice numbers, but a few carries. Hassan Haskins has 14 carries for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. And, I mean, I know they split carries to Zach Charbonnet, but he doesn't have very many touches either. And so I think they need to be very close to even in terms of play calling. Like we were talking about Notre Dame being even, I think it's even more important for Michigan because they don't have the line necessarily that Notre Dame has, and because Joe Milton's young and Ian Book's been there, done that. And so if they're able to even out their play call, run the ball on a Indiana team that hasn't proven that they're really that great defensively, because Penn State kind of shot themselves in the foot, and Rutgers is just a bad offensive team. So I think that Michigan is the favorite in this game, which is contrary to the belief of ESPN, and they've got Indiana as a 57% favorite here, according to FPI. But what do you make of it?
It's really interesting to me, right? Though, because Rutgers beat Michigan State in week 1, right? And then Michigan State just beat Michigan, and then Indiana just beat Rutgers. So there's all of these kind of fluctuations. I know they've only played 2 weeks in the season. A lot of that's probably up in the air as to whether or not those were just bad performances or teams are actually legitimate. But I think there's a legitimate cause for Indiana. They beat Penn State, who is ranked in the top 15. I forget exactly where they were. I think they were in the top 10 even.
I think they were 8.
Yeah, when they knocked them off. And then they just beat a Rutgers team that was coming off their biggest win in probably at least 5 years over Michigan State. So I think there's a lot to like if you're Indiana in this matchup. I think you have shown that you have explosive ability on offense. Penix Jr. is a good quarterback. He's athletic, he can run, and he made so many good throws. He really surprised me in that drive when they were playing Penn State late in the fourth quarter to tie up that game, get a 2-point conversion, force overtime to even have a chance to win. So I think you have the talent if you're Indiana to compete with a powerhouse in the Big Ten of Michigan. And if there's ever a year for something like this to happen, I think it's this year, because Michigan is just a little bit more unproven on offense. Joe Milton, they're like exactly like you said, they're not going to win if that guy's throwing 50 times a game. That was just shocking to me, truth be told. And so I think there's just a lot to digest here with just how good Indiana actually is on offense, and can their defense make enough plays to keep Michigan from scoring, truth be told.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. To me, I think what moves the needle a little bit on why I think Michigan's going to win is they've been there and done that as a program more than Indiana has. I mean, Harbaugh, he could be on the hot seat if he loses this game, and we can discuss that too. But I think that he knows that, and he'll use that as motivation. And Michigan's just got more elite athletes. They've got Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye on the edge, and they're both elite pass rushers who will be in the NFL next season. And I think they're going to make Michael Penix Jr. really, really work. Like he's got to be very sharp and can't turn the ball over, because this Michigan team's got a ton of speed and experience on the defensive end. And this Indiana team hasn't proven that they can create stops consistently and score consistently. They've kind of done one of each game, and they got lucky against Penn State with a few mental errors on the part of Sean Clifford and some fumbles. And I just don't think they're as experienced in big game moments.
I would agree. I think you mentioned a lot there that's really important. I also think this is probably the biggest game in Indiana football history in recent memory, for sure. I can't tell you the last time they were ranked number 13, playing a top 25 team with a chance to prove they're one of the best teams in the Big Ten this year. That's crazy. They weren't there recently. So I think there's so much, like we touched on with BYU last game that we previewed. There's just so much riding on Indiana in this game, and so you want to take them. You want to say that they've looked very good in their first 2 games, but then again, like there's these ebbs and flows in a college football season that a lot of people talk about, and this is just one of those games that you have Michigan, who just got flat out embarrassed at home against the Michigan State team, And you have all these rumors: is Harbaugh going to stay? He's on the hot seat. What's happening there? What's wrong with Michigan? And then you got this Indiana team that's, oh, we're number 13 in the country now. We beat Penn State. We beat Rutgers. And we have all this momentum. This is just setting up perfectly for that flow in the opposite direction for Michigan to just have an amazing performance. And that scares me a little bit as I'm not an Indiana fan, but if you are an Indiana fan, that should scare you a little bit. But also, I do think they have the explosive nature on offense to be able to play with Michigan, and I just think they need to make enough stops on defense to stop Michigan. I don't think they can allow Michigan to score more than 28 points and expect to win, truth be told.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder if some teams play better with their back against the wall than they do against front runners. And I think Michigan may fall in that category. And I think there are very few teams that, like the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Ohio States of the world, that are prohibitive favorites in every game and are able to motivate themselves and say, hey, we're going to make the college football playoffs. And I just wonder if that's such an unfamiliar territory for Indiana, the inexperience of that will favor Michigan is kind of my thinking.
I totally agree. And like, if Michigan does lose this game, that means it's just like, well, I mean, you obviously have Indiana because Indiana plays Ohio State, but it's Indiana and Ohio State. And if you were to tell me at the beginning of this football season that we'd be sitting here 3 weeks into the Big Ten season telling me that Michigan and Penn State were both unranked, I would tell you you're absolutely outside your mind, crazy. But that's very much a possibility if Indiana wins this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, weird season, weird things happen, but that's the beauty of it. And I mean, I'm kind of like, I want the Hoosiers to do well. It's just my brain is telling me that Michigan's been there and done that more.
I want to save kind of the point about Jim Harbaugh and his potential of falling to 1-2 this season for possible recap episode / news, things that we could hear in that camp. But I do want to make the point that if this does not go his way, I don't have the exact stat on how many games he's lost as a Michigan coach versus the AP top 25, but it is very, very high, and the number of wins is not as high. So I think a lot is riding on Michigan this week and him as a coach. So I think you can expect Michigan to come play like their season depends on it, because quite frankly it does. But also at that point in time, I think Indiana does have the talent to win this football game, truth be told.
Absolutely.
All right, so with all that being said, those are our top 25 matchups this week. We do have 2 more games that we're going to preview for you. Moving out west due to the Pac-12 opening their season this week, we're going to start things off with probably the earliest game, at least in their time zone. It's a 9 a.m. kickoff time, Pacific time, noon Eastern, on Fox. Arizona State traveling to USC to take on number 20 in the Coliseum. Let's talk about this. We always have to just reset when something like this happens. I did this exact same thing with the Big Ten. This is a brand new season for these teams. They haven't played yet. That's kind of hard to comprehend. We've been doing this for a while now, but these 2 teams are 2 of the 3 trending best teams in the Pac-12 South. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, these 2, along with Utah, are for sure the favorites. USC, in my opinion, has the best quarterback in the conference in Keaton Slovis, and they've got tons of weapons. I mean, they're USC. That's what they do. They have offensive talent like crazy and they recruit super well. And Arizona State under Herm Edwards is trending in the right direction. They've got a really talented quarterback of their own in Jaden Daniels. And so this will be a really interesting matchup to see who comes out sharper in the first game, not to mention waking up at 6 a.m. for warm-ups that really does matter. Like you hear about it in basketball more frequently when like a West Coast team goes to the East Coast and they play a morning game, and that doesn't happen very much in football. But it matters to see who comes out sharper.
It's honestly one of the things you don't necessarily hear a lot about. I know there's a lot of talk to get the Pac-12 into those earlier slotted games to make sure that the rest of the country is available to see them and see what they're able to do. But 9 a.m. is just a little bit excessive, at least in my opinion. But to build off of what you talked about, I think this is a massive year for USC. I think they have so much talent on the offensive side of the football, as well as experience and depth on the defensive side of the ball. With what you've talked about, with how well that they recruit, I think the last few years have been a little bit of letdowns for USC. I think Clay Helton has underperformed as a head coach at USC, and that and that can all go away this year. They're entering in the top 20. They haven't even played a game yet. So that clearly shows that they have that the preseason polls are saying that this is going to be a very good football team. Keaton Slovis, like you touched on, is very talented, but they have two of probably the best wide receivers in the Pac-12. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Vaughns are both just explosive playmakers on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in their backfield, they have two seniors, Stephen Carr and Veve Malapai, and both of them handle the ball a ton. And so I think their offense is probably the best on paper in the Pac-12. So it really comes down to how well their defense plays and how well the game's called. I think Ty Martin, one of their offensive coordinators, and Clay Helton, like you said, he seems to play his best coaching. Like the USC plays the best ball when he's on the hot seat. And I don't know if he's on the hot seat yet, but he has been. And that's when Sam Darnold came and saved him. And Keaton Slovis may well do the same thing. And they certainly have the talent to go out there and keep Clay Helton that job. And it reflects poorly on Helton when they don't win because they have so much talent.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the flip side of this one. Arizona State's offense, they lose two of their best playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. Brandon Ayuk is now with the San Francisco 49ers. He was an explosive wide receiver, to say the least. And Eno Benjamin was one of the best backs, in my opinion, in the Pac-12. Kind of a sneaky pick there. What can we expect from this offense that lost two of their best players? I know Jaden Daniels is still there. He's still young. He's still learning. What can we expect from them in this one, traveling to the Coliseum, this early kick? Do we see jitters? Do we see rust? What can we expect from this Arizona State team?
I actually expect them to come out really well. I think Herm Edwards is one of those type of guys who is just motivational. And I think Jaden Daniels doesn't know much better. He's just 2 years out of high school now. And, I mean, this is his second year. And I think he's going to come out there and play a game where, hey, this is a big game. We're playing at the Coliseum, and there's not the hostility at the Coliseum. There's no fans. So I think this will be a big game for him, and I don't think he'll have the jitters really. He doesn't seem that way to me, and I could be wrong, but I think the loss of Eno Benjamin is huge. He doesn't have someone to turn around to and say, "Hey, well, go get me 5 yards here," and that's what Eno Benjamin did. Plus big plays. They got two freshman running backs in DeMonte Trayanum and Daniel Nada. And I think they'll have to really prove their salt in this matchup because USC, like you touched on, has a good defensive front, and they're always talented. But I think they're going to come out well. I think this will be a high-scoring game.
I agree. I think Herm Edwards will get that team ready to play. Also, I do think Jaden Daniels is very talented, and we've seen him show up in very big games and play very well. I've also seen him show up in big games and perform poorly. So there's a lot to unpack with Jaden Daniels, but he threw for almost 3,000 yards last season, threw 17 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. So he really took significant strides of taking care of the football for that Arizona State team that was in the top 25 up and down a little bit last season, proving that they're one of the more up-and-coming programs in this Pac-12 South Division. I think an underrated storyline here in this game is Jaden Daniels' athletic ability. We've touched on this a lot already in this episode. Quarterback run for Arizona State is going to be huge. You got two freshman running backs. They're going to have to utilize the read option. You're going to have to see Jaden Daniels carry the football, extend plays, scramble a little bit for big third down conversions and things like that keep a team in a football game against a team like USC, who just is chock full of talent up and down their roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think both quarterbacks are going to come out well and outplay the defenses, and it's kind of who has the ball last or who doesn't give up an extra turnover, and that's what this game will come down to. And I'm excited to see how a Pac-12, that they haven't played a lot, like they haven't practiced a ton. I'm curious to see how much of the playbook that Slovis and Daniels have mastered now as they're getting more experience as starters in their careers.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to bookmark one thing in this game. Christian Zendejas is a sneaky good kicker for Arizona State. He's made a lot of kicks in the past that have sent teams over the edge and won games for his team. So put a bookmark on that one. If it comes down to a field goal, Arizona State has a really good kicker. I'm gonna leave that. I love to leave the special teams bookmark in there for everyone. But great kicker on that side of the ball for Arizona State. Again, crazy early kickoff Pacific time. That's gonna be 9 a.m. noon Eastern for all the folks back east. That's on Fox. So Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt will have that one in the Coliseum for for everyone to start their
You
day.
can already hear Gus Johnson yelling touchdown early and often in that game. He'll wake you up if you're not already.
Two of the best in the business, honestly. So we then are going to finish our preview today before our picks. We have one more game for you. We're gonna give you this one. It's the 7:30 Eastern game on ABC. Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler. Speaking of two of the best in the business, Stanford is traveling to Autzen Stadium to take on number 12 Oregon, who hasn't yet to play a game. I'm just going to set the stage a little bit and then hand you the reins for this one because you've done more research than probably anyone on the planet about this game. So I'll talk a little bit about what Oregon it has to overcome in this game, and then I'll hand you the reins. So they lose Justin Herbert, a 4-year starter at quarterback. He was a dynamic playmaker for that team. And Troy Dye was that guy as well on the defensive side of the ball. Quarterback and linebacker, they're both going pro. So they return Pac-12 first-team projections, D-end outside linebacker combo. Kayvon Thibodeau kind of wreaked havoc, really showed himself in that championship game against Utah, really was a complete difference maker in that football game, showed he can really bring the pressure off of the edge. And then you have a guy on the inside of that defensive line in Jordan Scott, who is one of the biggest men I have ever seen in my entire life. That dude is absolutely massive and can stop the run almost single-handedly. And then you have C.J. Verdell, Oregon's running back, who is just the epitome of steady, in my opinion. He reminds me a lot of Royce Freeman when Royce Freeman was there for Oregon. He is just one of those guys that you can rely on to hand the ball. He scores touchdowns. He's good between the tackles, but explosive on the outside. And that's just one of the pieces that they have at running back. They have Cyrus Habiki-Likio and then Travis Dye, the younger brother of Troy Dye. And they all can run the ball really well. So they're clearly not devoid of talent on the offensive side of the ball. But they lost 5 starters on the offensive line, including a top 5 pick, Penei Sewell. You just can't replace that stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so Oregon is still, in my opinion, the most talented team in the Pac-12, and they still have ridiculous amounts of talent, but they're young, and they don't have a lot of returning experienced players, and that really matters against teams such as Stanford, who have played in a lot of big games under David Shaw against Oregon in Autzen, with their typically hostile stadium environment. And so that eases this matchup for Stanford. I think a big thing for Oregon that we talk about is they lose Troy Dye, but on defense, they were coming back into this game and were going to have the best cornerback and defensive back just as a whole, safety and corners. They were going to have the best group in the entire nation, in my opinion. And they almost lost every single player from their secondary. They were able to retain Diamador Lenoir, and Lenoir was joining a group that featured Brady Breeze, Javon Holland, and Thomas Graham, all opting out this season to avoid injury because they're all supposed to be draft picks, but they didn't enter the draft thinking that this season would be normal. So you can see how that would be problematic for an Oregon team, but they certainly have talent led by Kayvon Thibodeau and Jordan Scott. They also returned Johnny Johnson at 57 receptions, 836 yards, and 7 touchdowns last season. But Oregon doesn't have Justin Herbert, who's balling out in the LA Chargers now. And so that's a big deal. You lose a quarterback and your entire offensive line, and it's hard to replace regardless of how good your running backs are. So their quarterback play is going to be from Tyler Shaw or grad transfer from Boston College, Anthony Brown. Mario Cristobal, head coach of the Oregon Ducks, has elected to keep that a secret, and I respect that. On the flip side, though, I think Stanford is a really interesting team because they were 4-8 last season, but as we touched on in the last episode, they're one of the 10. They've played in a lot of really big games and one of the better programs in the past 10 years. They had 27 players last season who played in that missed 5 or more games. I mean, that's ridiculous if you consider that you got 11 players on each side of the ball. They lost Casey Toohill, an outside linebacker, and then they lost all Pac-12 players, Walker Little, offensive tackle, and cornerback Paulson Adebo. And in this game, they got hit by the injury bug a little early. They're losing Caillou Kelly, an up-and-coming corner, and outside linebacker Gabe Reed, who will be starting. But because of how many players they lost last season, They became experienced they were thrust into the fire and now have a ton of depth. So who they bring back is an incredibly experienced offensive line with a first-team center, Drew Dahlman, talented tackles in Walter Rouse at left tackle and right tackle Foster Sorrell, who was a 5-star top 10 recruit, and 2 young but experienced guards who are thrust into the fire that are going to be tasked with blocking Jordan Scott, which is no easy task, as Scott said. They also bring back Davis Mills, who was in a battle with KJ Costello, who transferred to Mississippi State, and he had a 144 QB rating, even in an injury-riddled campaign where he also missed 5 games. And they bring in incredible running back play that is reminiscent of old Stanford teams led by Christian McCaffrey and Bryce Love. Now, am I saying that these guys, Austin Jones and Nathaniel Peter, are as good as Christian McCaffrey and Bryce Love? I don't think so. But that would be, any team would want that. They also bring back in the best room of receivers in the Pac-12, and I'd say even over our USC. They have Michael Wilson, who's a second-team All-Pac-12 player, who's a possession receiver, 56 yards for 56 receptions for 672 yards. Connor Weddington, who's electric with his ball in his hands. He's kind of the Pac-12 version, a little bit of Jalen Waddle, not quite to that extreme. And then their biggest and fastest receiver is Simi Fehoko, who's a redshirt sophomore, broke out at the end of the last season. For the last 5 games alone, he had 17 receptions for 403 yards and 5 touchdowns. So this game, to me, comes down to whose offensive line can can push against the defensive line of the other team, because they both have big running games, and both teams are depleted in the secondary. Stanford loses Paulson Adebo and Kyle Kelly, as I said, and so they're throwing in some new starters in Ethan Bonner and Salim Turner-Muhammad. But their safeties are absolute studs. They've got Jonathan McGill playing nickel and safety. He's a super versatile player out of Texas. And Malik Antoine, a 5th-year senior, and Kendall Williamson, a really, really good athlete. And so I'm wondering if their safeties can compensate for the loss of really talented corners. So those are some of the key players and in this game. And the linebacker group for Stanford, which I forgot, is Curtis Robinson, a really talented 5-star recruit as well, and Ricky Miezon Jr., who, funny story, really watch out for this guy, guys. He was a lacrosse player and then decided, hey, I'm going to play football at Stanford. That doesn't happen very often. He's 6'4", 245, and runs a 4.45. So he is incredibly impressive. And this game, to me, is a lot closer than a lot of people say. Oregon, the line has been shifting down and down further and further because they don't know who's playing quarterback. And I think Davis Mills is 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in the Pac-12 conference, behind Keaton Slovis and maybe Jaden McDaniels. So I think this is a really interesting game for Herb Street and Fowler to call. That really is going to be closer than people would assume, in my opinion. Do you have anything you want to add to that really overly detailed breakdown?
Do you need to take a minute? Do you need to catch your breath, some water?
Oh, no, I'm still going. I love Pac-12 football, everyone. Pac-12 football is what gets me going. All morning I have been reading about these games, and I can't wait.
Oh, we love to see it. We love to hear it. Pac-12 brings a lot of joy back to the conference. All Power 5 teams, all Power 5 conferences back now playing. So as long as you're good, we can continue on. I think it's clear that you've done more research about this than anyone else in the market. So I'm happy to have you with me on this one. But I do think a very intriguing thing in this game is this matchup is always competitive, always, regardless of who Stanford is bringing in. I think in the past few years, Stanford has had rosters that aren't necessarily up to snuff with Oregon, but they always compete, always play them tough, regardless of where it is, fans or not. It's one of those matchups, kind of like we saw with Ohio State, Penn State. Like you never know what's going to happen, and a few plays throughout the course of the game can really change momentum and impact the game moving forward. With that being said, I think Oregon is still missing a ton. They have a lot of question marks to answer, but I do think there is a lot of youth and experience coming in on both sides of this matchup that I think is going to be, like you touched on, very, very close. I'm shocked, quite honest with you, that Oregon's ranked number 12.
And I think talent-wise, it's fair. They just haven't done anything. And if they had all those players coming back, Penei Sewell would be still on this team, and the other 4 would have graduated. But he's such a big deal. I mean, even without Justin Herbert, I still think they'd be a top 6 team, like in terms of preseason rank, if it was a normal thing. they'd be competing for the Pac-12 in terms of who can make this conference title. But the first game with a new quarterback and no offensive line, that's what brings me belief if I'm Stanford. I think Stanford should say, hey, look, our defensive line isn't phenomenal, but if we load the box and we have those really speedy linebackers in Curtis Robinson and Ricky Miezon Jr., that we are going to have to be beaten by an inexperienced quarterback that has never played with this offensive line. It is his first snaps in the Pac-12 that are meaningful. He's 12 of 15 for 144 yards in garbage time. So you're going to make him work for this and make Johnny Johnson, Micah Pittman, and Jalen Redd beat your corners. That being said, Stanford is missing their top two corners, which really hurts their chances. And if Caillou Kelly were healthy, he's a really emerging corner. I think Stanford would have a very legitimate chance to win this game. And one thing I didn't touch on, but you brought it up, was Penn State, Ohio State. This is an underrated national rivalry. These two teams bring the best out of each other. And I don't think Oregon's in that Ohio State mold where they're so used to being the prohibitive favorite that they can just go out there and say, hey, we're gonna come out motivated as ever because we're going to make the college football playoff. I think they're gonna come out motivated because it's their first game and it's a big game. But it's harder to come out and be like, hey, they're gunning for us when you're not experienced with that, especially without a quarterback and offensive line that's played. And as always, watch out for special teams. Oregon's typically very good in special teams, but Stanford's also very good. They've got a great kicker in Jet Toner, and their punter, Ryan Sanborn, improved greatly as the season went on because he was fresh out of high school, wasn't supposed to be playing. Injuries had him come in, and he really improved. And I think that if it comes down to kicking, I trust Jet Toner more than Oregon kicker Camden Lewis. And then the biggest matchup to me in this game is, can the Oregon defensive backs that are so depleted with, Lenoir came back, but that's it. That is it. Can they battle with Simi Fehoko, Michael Wilson, and Connor Weddington? And can Stanford's depleted backs battle against Jalen Redd, Micah Pittman, and Johnny Johnson? Whoever wins that battle of receiver corners and whichever offensive line is able to move the defensive line better, which I think is favoring Stanford, is really going to impact this game. And of course, turnovers. Every game, I'm going to say it, turnovers and quarterback play. So this is an incredibly intriguing matchup to me. And as you can see, I love the Pac-12. So I'm super happy to have this one back. And I don't think you're going to watch too many preview shows that are going to have the Pac-12 covered like we do.
That is for sure. I think this is one of the best matchups that you can open up Pac-12 play with. I think this is, like we touched on, one of those amazing rivalries that really flies under the radar and in the national spotlight. But this game is going to kick off at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC, 5:30 Mountain time, 4:30 Pacific. That's Stanford going to number 12 Oregon. No fans in Autzen Stadium. Is going to be a very, very different scene there. So with that being said, we're going to actually move on and start picking some of these fantastic matchups. We got a full docket of games to pick for you. Looking at it, I'm a little shocked at where my brain was a couple hours ago when we wrote some of these down. But let's get this started with our first game that we're going to pick, and that's that exceptional matchup in the SEC East with number 8 Florida traveling to Jacksonville to take on number 5 Georgia. What do we got there?
I'm very nervous. The more we spoke about this game, the more I lean toward Florida because of the quarterback play. But I think Georgia's defense is just so much better than Florida's. I think they're the favorite in this game. But that said, I think it'll be really close, and it'd be horribly, horribly painful as someone who wants Georgia to be good, to have them, struggle with Stetson Bennett. So I think Georgia's going to come out and run the ball and do enough on offense, throwing the ball, that they're going to win, but it'll be close.
We've tied both weeks. I'm going opposite you this one. I'm going Florida. I think Kyle Trask is elite with the ball in his hand. In college football, I usually lean towards the more talented offense to take over the more powerful defense. I just think that matchup's always usually come in that way. I picked against Florida last week against Missouri. That was very disrespectful, and I'm very sorry to Florida fans out there who took that in that way. So I'm going Florida this week. They pull the upset there and beat number 5 Georgia and are well on their way to playing Alabama for a chance for their season to really take off. I'm going Florida. All right, another top 25 matchup, number 23 Michigan traveling to number 13 Indiana. What do we have there?
I kind of hinted at my pick in this one. I think Michigan's going to come out firing. Their backs against the wall. They're going to play for their coach. The people like Harbaugh. His only knock has been he doesn't beat Ohio State, which is hard, and then he loses to Michigan State, which is sometimes inexplicable. But they come out and play most games, and this is one that they're going to have to come out and play. No fans is going to help. No one in Bloomington to boo them, and I think they're going to come out and win this game against Indiana.
All that momentum heading towards Indiana's way. I think it's a perfect scenario to pick Michigan. But with that being said, I'm rolling with the momentum. Indiana's going to take down number 23 Michigan. They're going to continue this impressive run that they're on. I do think they have enough talent on offense to make that happen. My only question or worry in this pick is if they can play enough defense to keep Michigan off the scoreboard enough for their offense to win the game. I don't know, but I'm rolling with the momentum and I'm rolling with Indiana. So with that being said, Friday night, the big showdown for people in these neck of the woods, BYU, Boise State. Who we got winning there in Boise, Idaho?
I'm taking the home team. I'm taking Boise State. They've got more experience and, in my opinion, more talent. And I think one of the big things we didn't really talk about a ton was the BYU most electric players so far this year has been Dax Milne, and he's really athletic and he's really quick, but he's not a big guy. And I think he's been faster than everyone he's played so far, and I don't think he'll be faster than Boise State. So Zach Wilson's going to have to spread the ball out more and have a more egalitarian approach. And I think Boise State's too talented on defense, so I'm going with Boise State.
I'm going Boise State as well, and that scares me that we're picking together, but I'm also going Boise State as well. I just think they have so much depth and so much experience and continuity that we touched on defense to give Zach Wilson enough fits. I just think there's too much riding on BYU in this game, and I think Boise State's going to come out more fired up than they've ever been to play a game at home. You got the blue turf, you got a Friday night game. I just think there's so much that needs to go right for BYU in this matchup, but I think it doesn't happen. So unfortunately, for BYU fans out there, I am going to go Boise State. I do think BYU is a great team. I think this is a fantastic matchup. It's going to be so fun to watch. But I do think Boise State pulls it out in a squeaker there on Friday night. Moving right along, we got number 7, Texas A&M, fringe college football team, even though they've already lost to Alabama, traveling to South Carolina. Do the Aggies see any trouble there with the Gamecocks?
I think they could. I think South Carolina's got a really talented defensive back. They've got J.C. Horn and a guy's name I cannot hope to pronounce, but they've got some NFL talent in their defense. And Colin Hill's a pretty good quarterback, but I think Texas A&M is too much. I think they're playing for a lot as well. If somehow Alabama slips up and so they get some really good luck, then they've got a chance. They're never number 7 in the poll, and I think they've proven it. They've beaten Florida already, so I'm going with the Aggies.
I'm going Aggies as well. I think they're too much to handle. I think they've showed that they can beat Florida. I picked Florida over Georgia, so with that logic, I got to go Texas A&M over South Carolina to hold off there. A sneaky good game in the Pac-12 South, in my opinion, is Arizona traveling to Utah. I think Utah's that third trending upwards program in the Pac-12, this South Division, Who do you got winning Arizona traveling to Utah?
I think Utah. I think Utah's a weird team though, because they lost their quarterback Tyler Huntley, and now they like Oregon have not announced their starting quarterback. It's between Cam Rising and Jake Bentley, a transfer from South Carolina. So that transition fit beautifully. And I think they lose a ton from their defense. They had 9 guys go pro, but I think they retain enough, and they've got a really good culture under Coach Whittingham that they're going to be better than Arizona, but they really need to improve quickly as this season goes.
News out of the Utah camp, Coach Whittingham just got extended to 2027, so a new contract security there. I do think Utah wins the football game, but they have so much to replace on the defensive side of the ball. They lost so many starters from probably one of their best defenses in school history. I do think Arizona competes a little bit more than people are anticipating them doing. I think I just for some reason view this as a sneaky game. It's going to kick off 1:30 Eastern time here, Mountain time. So I just think it's one of those games that can fly under the radar. But with Coach Witt, I think the Utes come out and play a solid football game. But like you said, they have so much to replace on both sides of the ball. So with that being said, let's move on to Houston, going to our boys, as people like to call them on this show, number 6 Cincinnati.
I mean, yeah, how could I go against them? I mean, Cincinnati is dismantling teams. And speaking of good defenses from Utah last season, Cincinnati's causing turnovers at an alarming rate, just like Utah did. So that being said, I'm going Cincy, and I think they're going to win big this again.
We've picked together a lot in a row here, but you like you said, you can't go against Cincinnati. I think their defense is one of the best in the country, and they are also coupled that with the ability to score an ungodly amount of points on their teams. I don't think Houston's going to be able to stop them, and I think Cincinnati's defense is better than the Houston offense. So I'm rolling Cincinnati. I think they're truly one of the best top 10 teams in the country. So I'm rolling Cincy in that one. All right, we're moving on to the game that you so lovingly gave us so much information about. We love to have it. Stanford traveling to number 12, Oregon. I even don't even know.
I think we're going to disagree on this one. We've talked about this off air. I think Stanford's going to pull the upset. Oregon was the hottest team since they're selling everyone. Everyone was so high in Oregon. Oregon's lost so much, and Stanford's coming in off a 4-8 season with a really good quarterback, and they have experience. So I'm taking the experience over talent, and that's not to say Stanford's not talented. So I'm rolling Stanford.
I like that pick. I like it, but I can't go with it. I have to go with Oregon. They are playing at home. I know that's not necessarily a huge deal with no fans in Autzen Stadium, but they're just a team that I think has built this program so much in the last few years, and I think a really sneaky addition that I didn't add into the time that we had there is Joe Moorhead, the offensive coordinator, just got there. He was extremely prolific with Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, at the offensive coordinator role under Penn State. They had some of their best years, really turned that program around with James Franklin there. Went to Mississippi State. That didn't really pan out in the SEC, but he has a brilliant offensive mind. And that combination at Oregon kind of scares the living crap out of me for the rest of the Pac-12. But so I'm going with Oregon in this one. What were you going to add? Anything else there?
I think Mario Cristobal. I think he scares me as a Pac-12 guy more than Chip Kelly did, and that's saying something because they made it to the championship game. They were horrifying to play with that up tempo, but he's building something that's going to last. Eventually, teams are going to catch up to Chip Kelly. I think Mario Cristobal has built this offensive line paradise. They had 5 dominant guys last year. And now they recruited. They got Kayvon Thibodeau. They got 2 5-star linebackers this past year. But I just don't think those guys play into this game. So I mean, down the road, Oregon's going to be terrifying. But in this game, I'm taking the experience over some of the young talent.
I think that's totally fair. We'll keep it right here in the Pac-12. Arizona State traveling to number 20 USC. That crazy early kickoff that we've alluded to a couple times. Who do you got in this one?
This is one that your points in the opener nearly changed my mind, but I think I'll stick with USC. I think I've got USC because Slovis is more experienced than McDaniels. I mean, yeah, just Daniels, not McDaniels. And he's got such an abundance of weapons. They got 2 senior running backs and 2 incredibly explosive wide receivers in Vaughns and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think they're just going to score a few more points. But like I said in what we were covering, it's going to come down to one possession. Whoever's got the ball last, to me, is going to win.
Yeah, I'm going Arizona State. I persuaded myself with my comments in the preview there. I just think Jaden Daniels is one of the best, most talented players in the Pac-12, and I think he grew so much from his freshman year to his sophomore year. He's going to take even more strides this year, and I just think his legs and his ability to extend plays and keep that USC defense on edge, I think, is going to be the difference in this game. And I've got Arizona State to pull out the upset in that just god-awfully early kick at 9 a.m. I'm not sure any of the teams are going to be ready to go at that time of day, but we'll see what happens there. Oklahoma State at Kansas State.
I think it's got to be Oklahoma State. I think Kansas State doesn't have the offensive firepower without Skylar Thompson, their starting quarterback, and I think Oklahoma State's going to come out angry that they played a bad game with 5 turnovers against Texas. So I think this will be a pretty clinical game by Gundy's group from Stillwater.
I got Oklahoma State as well. I think they're going to be a little disappointed in their last week's performance. Kansas State was ranked. I still think they're without Skylar Thompson, their starting quarterback. So I got Oklahoma State in this one, and just a tough stretch there for Kansas State with a loss to West Virginia, and then Oklahoma State coming in the back-to-back weeks. I think Oklahoma State's probably still the best team in the Big 12, but with that loss, they got bumped down in the rankings, and rightfully so. With all of that being said, we are now brought to our game of the week. We got number 1 Clemson traveling to number 4 Notre Dame, South Bend. We got the Tigers versus the Fighting Irish. Yeah, who we got?
Man, I almost convinced myself to pick Notre Dame, but I think I'm going Clemson. I think Clemson's better all around, and DJ playing rather than Trevor Lawrence isn't earth-shattering. Like, he's so talented, and Trevor Lawrence I view as the best player in all of college football. So for me to say that losing that guy doesn't kill the team, it speaks to how good they are, just how much talent they have, how well coached they are with Dabo Swinney and Brett Venables. And I just think Notre Dame's a little too one-dimensional, as you said. I don't think their defense is going to cause enough turnovers, which is their real hope. And I don't think they can run the ball all day without Ian Book having a threat to throw and run. And so I think they're a little too one-dimensional for them to pull this upset, but they're certainly going to keep it close. I've got a 27-20 Clemson win in South Bend.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think Clemson wins the game. But I think the first quarter is going to be very telling as to how this game progresses. I'm very adamant that if Notre Dame is able to come out and throw the ball with success and move the ball down the field against Clemson and score early, it's going to set the tone. If they can't do that, Clemson gets a stop or Clemson scores first, and Notre Dame feels that, we have to fight back from the very get-go, it's going to be a long day for Notre Dame. I think if they fall behind, it's a long shot for them to come through. With that being said, I'm taking Clemson. I'm going with a kind of an odd score line here, but I'm going 31-10 Clemson. I think the later scenario plays out where Notre Dame just falls a little bit behind too early, tries to make too many plays, and then that Clemson defense really starts to rear its head a little bit and have a much better performance than it did week 1.
Yeah, I think your point about them playing better defense than against Boston College and coming out knowing hey, Ian Book's got to be this, not the run game is very true, and I could very much see that happening. But yeah, I'm sticking with my score. I like the analysis though. I like it.
That's what we're here for. We could be totally wrong. You picked first this week, so you got to set your matchups, and I was able to go off that a little bit, and we try to diversify things. Hey, a lot of these games are coin flips. A lot of these games could go a lot of different ways. They're fun, compelling matchups. It's just going to be a fantastic week of college football, and we were just so excited to bring you this preview, and we'll be even more excited to break down what happens over the weekend for everyone on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think there's going to be more of these type of weeks, great weeks to come. So keep tuning in, keep asking us questions that you guys have. And we're really enjoying previewing these games and giving you all the news. And so please let us know if there's anything more we can do for you guys.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for Leif and I today. Sorry, we've kept you a little bit longer than our normal time frame, but there was just so much to talk about, so many good things to delve into. So that's going to do it for this preview episode. We'll make sure to catch you all on Sunday afternoon to recap it all for you. Thanks, everyone, and have a great college football weekend. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.